Uh-huh. Yeah, I'm here. I'm here multitasking.
Greetings, greetings. This is Brother James Rogers. Are we ready to start?
Yes.
We are. Okay, again, I am James Rogers III. I serve as the Southwest Regional Representative
Yeah, I was probably.
for the National Coalition of Blacks for Reparations in America, otherwise known as NCOBRA. Let me turn my video on so you can see me. Thought I had it on. There we go. Yes, and I serve as the Southwest Regional Representative for the National Coalition of Black for Reparations in America. And I would like to welcome you to our Southwest Region National Reparations Day Teach-In. Again, I also serve as the co-chair of the Dallas chapter with Sister Lady Nelson, who's I believe is on this call. Uh, so we're going to have a teach-in today, and hopefully we can get it done in a couple of hours. Our goal today is to inform and educate, inform about the mission and the initiatives to win reparations by NCOBRA, and educate about the history and the scope of the reparations movement. And we hope that we accomplish you being inspired to learn more about the movement and about NCOBRA, and support the movement and the mission of NCOBRA. So normally when Africans come together, we normally uh, observe a spiritual moment, and we have invited a priestess, Sister Iyamode Shabande Fabingro, to do a libation for us. And so I'm going to turn it over to her and allow her to do it the way she does it. Okay, thank you.
I say peace and blessings, alafia, peace and blessings. I just wanted to just take one quick to thank you all for allowing me to pour a libation on this occasion, every occasion that I am allowed to uplift my ancestors. It's a feather in my cap, I feel, with them and helps me to fulfill my destiny. So again, I say Modupeo. I give thanks to God. I do this, it's called an ajuba, and I do this in several parts. However, the first part is Omi Tutu, since this is a teach-in, because I was, since it's a teach-in. The first part is Omi, Tutu, cool water, road, and all of that we need. Then I ask for no more death, destruction, confusion, trouble from the police, and then I uplift our ancestors and God. And then I will start to call on those names. I'll pause for a minute and prayerfully you all will say, you can mouth the names of your own ancestors for a few seconds. And then I'll come and close it with Fumini, asking God to bring us, asking Olodumare, the ancestors, to help to bring us the things we need to live a good life. And for long life and health and strength. Ashe, and then you all say Ashe. 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 Okay. So I need for you to take a position however it is most comfortable, and we're all sitting down and to give praise and honor to our ancestors. Look at me there. Omi tutu, ona tutu, ila tutu, tutu lada, tutu egon, kofi fo, kofi room, kofi kakibu, kofi loba, kofi wahala, kofi jamba, kofi ana, kofi ina, kofi buboru, kofi ashe lu, Olodumare, which is God, mojuba, oba aterere kaye, mojuba ati Yo or Joe, we say Mojuba in honor to the morning sun. Iba Ati Wo Orun, we give praise and honor to the setting sun. Mojuba Ori Baba, to the spirits of our ancestors, our father spirits. Iba Ordi Yeye, we give honor to the spirits of our mothers. Ashe. Mojuba, Kelly House, Kelly House, Kelly House, Isaiah Dickinson, Isaiah Dickinson, Isaiah Dickinson, Isaiah Dickinson, Queen Mother Moore, Queen Mother Moore, Queen Mother Moore, Dr. Imari Obadeli, Dr. Imari Obadeli, Dr. Imari Obadeli, Njeri Ahani, Njeri Ahani, Njeri Ahani, Kalonji Olusegun, Kalonji Olusegun, Baba Hannibal Alfred, Baba and Hannibal Alfred, Baba Hannibal Alfred, Dorothy Lewis, Dorothy Lewis, Dorothy Lewis. Reparations J. Jenkins, Reparations Ray Jenkins, Reparations Ray Jenkins, Chokwe Lumumba, Chokwe Lumumba, Chokwe Lumumba. Kwame Afo, Kwame Afo, Kwame Afo, Dr. Conrad World, Dr. Conrad World, Dr. Conrad World, Brother Fred Gaffar, Brother Fred Gaffar, Brother Fred Gaffar, Dr. Khalid Muhammad, Dr. Khalid Muhammad, Dr. Khalid Muhammad. And I'm pause for a minute as we call on our individual ancestors, just a few seconds, and call on those who I did not that I did not call on. Mojuba to all. Mojuba to all of our ancestors who died on the shores of Africa. Mojuba to our ancestors who died during the horrendous Middle Passage. Mojuba to all of our ancestors who died during the horrible institution of slavery. Mojuba to all our ancestors who died from the acts of Jim Crow. Mojuba to our ancestors now who continue to die, our brothers and sisters, the young ones who continue to die as victims of walking while Black, talking while Black, living while Black, and from police brutality. Ashe. Fumini Ire, Fumini Owo, Fumini Alafia, Fumini Agbon Ifa, Fumini Imo, Fumini Uye, Fumini, the 7 principles of Kwanzaa. Fumini Umoja, Kujichagulia, Ujima, Ujama, Nia, Kaumba Imani. Fumini Ire Omo, bring us long life, health, and strength for our children. Fumini Ire Obinring, long life, health, and prosperity for all the women. Fumini Ire Okiring, long life and health, prosperity for all the men. Ashe, you say Ashe, Ashe, say Ashe, Ashe to.
Jay.
Asheo.
Ashe.
We want to thank our priestess for a strong libation,
Ashe.
and we're going on to the culture presentation. I believe we have a video for that. Sister Kim,
Yep, I'm getting it together now.
thank you.
Heavy soul, heavy hearted, the weight of these days among us. The faith is fleeing, I see it, we praying. They praying on us, plotting on ways to be owners. They plotting on ways to own us and been killing us. Niggas just say what I hold they phone up. That angry, that paranoia, it's like they got us right where they want us. I play my post with the patience, he gon' throw us. Postpone it, I love it, cause power can seize nothing without a struggle. We drip with the blood of Jesus and Michael Phelps through these puddles. Know yourself through these troubles, I'm subtle. No crying tears, dodging doctors, pine fear, letting God steer the science here. They used to question God intent from the way that these eyes is bent. When I reflected on why I'm here, but see the connection, the why is clear. I fear itself and look in the mirror and see it clearer. My features that of a God when the purpose, cause they fear us to cut through the thick. Tension, we take pills and sip liquors and blowing so much loud. Can hear the angels that assist us, I'm slipping. But then the workings of the beneficent, merciful lifting me. Spitting these verses, the verses serving purpose. The sacrifice was personal. It got a strange hold, the game code. I pray I speak and change souls. I mean a strange. It got a strange hold. Like when that officer, who probably a Klansman, when he changed clothes, stood on that man neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds with a face expression that remained cold. I'm talking about a strange hole, physically, metaphorically, economically. Only on our roads that ain't roads, since roads ain't roads from front rows, since slaves put escape rows and corn rows, been scoring though. I mean a strange hole, I mean a crack cocaine hole, or a cocoa bang mode, we call it gang mode. Quick to let it rain though, the same folk with no shame though, to oppress us where that flame go. Won't apply the same though. Same jungle, same crow. I swear I got a strange hole. And anybody with a brain knows the institution, the housing, child support, prison, war on drugs, poverty, disease, obviously. Knew it would have a strange hold on we. Cripple the man, vain the mind of the woman, control the mind of the youth, make them spineless, want for nothing. A strange fucking hole. A Eric Gordon at the store type of strange hole. And seeing with reform and legislation far as change goes. But anybody with a brain knows reparation is the only liberation. Won't nobody drop that name, no. Though mentally they got a strange hole. Make you think it ain't possible, make you feel insane, though. The world screaming justice, it's time to mentally let them chains go. The birth of this idea could only come from the street. A bunch of yous and me's, no above ease. What a perfect time, plagues and viruses got a strange hold, no distractions, so let's do it properly. How we compensate people under our constitution if we take their property, but not people once considered property. If politicians don't support, sound like an optomy. If businesses don't support, won't get shit bought from me. That black dollar got a strange hold on the economy. We need economic plans of action, no apologies to acknowledge me. Ain't no justice, no peace, but jail ain't worse than hell, so just pray you're on the right side of karma, America. Cause on this side, God got a strange hold on our minds, hearts, and hands to do what we was trained for. Momentum up, don't let this thing go. March, ride, loop, burn shit, if that's the cost to turn shit into this American dream we never had a turn with. Every turn twist is a twist turn into a strange hole. It's time to let go. Reparations is the only liberation. They don't ever drop that name, no. Drop that name, no.
All right.
Oh, okay. I am Claudia Mama Fatima Peary Smith, and I also serve as the National Membership Commission co-chair for NCOBRA. And I'm here to present just an overview of the information that we're about to get in this teach-in. First, I want to thank you on behalf of on behalf of NCOBRA for you to come out here despite your busy schedule to join us to reach the goal of spreading reparations and making it a household word. This 2-hour teach-in will focus on the reasons why the lingering effects of slavery are still alive and well in the United States of America. Today's panel discussions are designed to help us understand how and why the mental, physical, and social economic damage caused by slavery is still unrepaired as we speak in the 21st century. This reparations teach-in also addresses what must be done to remedy the injuries that are still being suffered. Therefore, it is important to acknowledge that the work of NCOBRA is driven by a need to establish an injured party self-determination process for repairing, healing, and restoring a people who are presently endangered by the violation of their fundamental human rights in the United States of America. This discussion is badly needed because so little attention has been given to the 21st century demands of the USA's more visionary, militant, and progressive Black reparationists. See, the true meaning of reparations and the work of NCOBRA has been deliberately hidden from the eyes, hearts, and minds of the USA's African descendants by the powers that be until now. So now that we know what reparations is, what are we going to do about it? How do we even begin to hold those who enslaved, abused, and violated the human rights of the USA's African descendants accountable? What kind of beginning steps can be taken to make reparations a reality for the USA's African descendants? Enter the Federal House of Representatives Bill, H.R. 40, currently sponsored by the congressional member Sheila Lee Jackson of Texas, and a companion Senate Bill 1083, sponsored by Senator Cory Booker of New Jersey. Now, I do understand that a great many of us African descendants have no faith in and refuse to participate in electoral politics as it is practiced in this country. I also understand that such distrust is totally justified considering our historical experiences. However, I am asking you to please be patient with this speaker for just a few moments while we review the purpose and meaning of H.R. 40 and its potential impact on the future of Black America for educational and awareness purposes. H.R. 40, or the Commission to Study and Develop Reparations Proposals for African Americans Act, is designed to address the fundamental injustice, cruelty, brutality, and inhumanity of slavery in the United States and the 13 American colonies between 1619 and 1865. H.R. 40 calls for the establishment of a National African American Commission to hear proposals that prescribe remedies for the social economic problems caused by the lingering effects of slavery. Also, it is important to recognize that reparations proposals are nothing new. They've just always been squashed and ignored by the powers that be. Therefore, the history of the post-African slavery reparations movement is a long-term course of study all by itself. We will not get to most of that today, but nevertheless, it should be briefly noted that the former slave or African descendant Callie House, publicly called for African descendant reparations in 1897. The H.R. 40 bill itself is a reference to an earlier government proposal to provide each former Black slave family with 40 acres and a mule. And we are here today because that promise was quickly broken. In the 20th century, we would now call what we would now call reparations proposals were publicized by the Marcus Garvey's, Universal Improvement Association, the Nation of Islam, the Republic of New Africa, and numerous other Black organizations. The late Queen Mother Audley Moore delivered a reparations petition to the United Nations in 1957 and 1959. She and another late Queen Mother, Dara Abukari, also delivered a signature petition to President Kennedy's White House office in 1962. Ironically, however, it was the Japanese reparations movement that set the stage for the introduction of H.R. 40 to the United States Congress by the late congressional representative from Michigan, John Conyers, and a co-sponsor, the late Louis Stokes of Cleveland, Ohio. The Japanese claim to reparations was based upon the historic incarceration of Japanese American citizens in concentration camps during World War II. Congress eventually responded by passing the Civil Liberties Act of 1988. Surviving Japanese Americans were given financial reparations, and the injustice against them was acknowledged with an official public apology by the Republican President Ronald Reagan. The call for enslaved people of African descent to receive our long overdue reparations was heard in the halls of Congress a year later in 1989. H.R. 40, now as we speak today, has enough co-sponsors to be considered for passage by the U.S. Congress. I now yield to our upcoming panel on injuries and remedies. Ain't gonna let nobody turn us around. It's time for reparations now.
Ashe, ashe, oh. Oh, that's great. Hope you all understood all of that she said, because she did give a lot of information there. And we're gonna keep it moving. And I believe our first panel will be about the 5 injury areas. And I think she told you that these are areas that we have received harm in from enslavement up until today. We're still suffering these atrocities. And so once our panelists describe these things, you will see that this harm is real, and we have a work to do to be repaired and to repair ourselves. So without over speaking, I think we have the first panelist, Baba Lucata, and he will be speaking on our nationhood, our peoplehood. And that is one of the most serious in my eyesight, because we have so many of our people not even claiming to be African again. And so our sense of our culture, our sense of our nation has been robbed from us. So Brother Lucata, can you unmute yourself and let us hear the harm that we are suffering because of our nationhood? And not only the harm, but what is the solution? How can reparations help to repair that harm? Brother Lucata, introduce yourself.
Barayaku to all on the call, and to all who will hear the call when this panel discussion is shared throughout the nation, which I hope it will be. My name is Asania Lucata Jakul. I served as a board member for NCOBRA, as well as the co-chair of the Media and Information Commission for NCOBRA. We also was a co-founder of the Jackson chapter of NCOBRA with Baba Hannibal Afrique, who we give praise and recognition to, and we say Ashe. Want to thank Mama Fatima for asking me to address the injury area of nationhood, peoplehood. And what I'd like to do is give you the definition, if I could, give you the definition of nationhood, peoplehood as defined by NCOBRA. NCOBRA defines nationhood, peoplehood as the destruction of African people's culture and the infringement of the larger culture upon Black people of African descent in the United States and throughout the diaspora, throughout the colonies. Jim Crow and the ongoing discrimination has resulted in a denial of our right to openly express our culture, the appropriation of our culture, and the denial of the rights and resources necessary to be self-determining as a people. Throughout this country's history, African descendants' efforts to be self-determinant has been met with violence and destruction, as evidenced by the untold number of Black townships, such as Greenwood, Oklahoma, Redwood, Florida, and Wilmington, North Carolina, townships ultimately destroyed because the surrounding white communities' jealousy and the need to suppress models that refute their claim of white supremacy. It is important to understand that Africanness is really a state of mind. While Africans are people of African descent who ultimately have African cultural roots, according to Kwame Nkrumah, he says, I am not African because I was born in Africa. I am African because African was born in me. This applies to indigenous people of Africa, as well as to their descendants living in other places across the globe. Being African is determined by our identity, our history, where we are originally from, it is our values and traditions. Sadly, the oppression of our Africanness is due to the cruel and brutal nature of white domination during the colonization and enslavement of African people. As a result of the denial of our peoplehood, our right to be a human being in all social cultures framed by white domination, better known as white supremacy, we realize that the claim of white domination is real, but in and of itself, it is not real. It is only a claim. It is the perpetual social indoctrination, the prolific miseducation, and propagandizing of African inferiority that has imbued the psyche of both new Africans, and when I say new Africans, I'm talking about the descendants of Africans who are here in America, as well as Africans on the continent, and even some Europeans, with the false notion of white supremacy or white superiority. This incredibly effective propagandizing combined with the uninhibited terrorization of African people have resulted in the injury area we know as peoplehood, nationhood. When we look at some of the elements of social indoctrination and the uninhibited terrorization of people of African descent, we come to see what we call our Black or African Holocaust. It's not a Holocaust, it's a Holocaust. It's far worse than anything that any other race of people or religion of people have endured. So we go back and we take a look at our Holocaust, and we'll start somewhere around 1518 and run up to 1865. And we realized that during that time period, the Holocaust was mainly focused on the enslavement and dehumanization of new Africans, the kidnapping, rape, and terrorizing of African people, the legal confirmation of our dehumanization, and then the medical experimentation of African people. Then we have to look at the protracted Holocaust that we look at beginning in 1865, and we see that the government failed to protect new Africans. We see the unfair sharecropping system. We recognize the 100 years of unjustified lynching of new Africans. We recognize the Black codes and the convict leasing that controlled new Africans. From there, we take a look at what we call the coded discrimination against us that began in 1920 and runs all the way through 2022 and counting. The government refusing education for new Africans. The Black concentration camps that we call ghettos. The sanctioned economic disenfranchisement of new Africans. The civil rights battles for new Africans against anti-African sentiment, laws, and customs. We even recognize the false investigations of racism by the United States government, the false or the fake war on drugs that they claim to have. We recognize the resistance to the new African Liberation Movement. We recognize that New Africans resisted white domination. We recognize the war against the pride of our new African identity. We recognize the war on poverty, which is directed at African people, and an admission by then President Nixon. And of course, we know that the mass incarceration is a tool used in our oppression. When we take a look at all this uninhibited white domination and terrorism, we have to recognize that there was and is response to. And that response started, of course, with the escape of our people from enslavement. The thousands of slave revolts, large and small, major and minor. The integration of Native people with new Africans, the formation of independent African communities, the abolition movement, the Underground Railroad, the initial human rights demands, or civil rights demands, I should say, the initial Black Reparations Initiative called the National Ex-Slave Mutual Relief, Bounty, and Pension Association. We look at the regiments of Black troops that fought for our freedom during the Civil War. We look at the request for land and education for self-determination in Savannah, Georgia after the Civil War. We look at the creation of land development or land settlements for new Africans in the 5 Georgia Sea Islands, led by Tunis Campbell. We look at the civil rights demands during the Reconstruction era. We look at the establishment of HBCUs, mainly in the South, but throughout. We look at the migration out of the South to escape oppressions by new Africans. We look at the anti-lynching campaign of Ida B. Wells, and that was later picked up by the NAACP. The formation of the NAACP itself, the formation of the Universal Negro Improvement Association by the Honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey. We look at the formation of our Black Pride movement during the Harlem Renaissance. We look at the modern day civil rights movement pushing for desegregation, sit-ins, marches, boycotts, freedom rides, marches, boycotts. We look at the formation of the Nation of Islam, the formation of our Black is Beautiful era, which we got to get back to. We look at the eruption of the Black retaliation against police brutality, which resulted in the burning down of many United States cities. We look at the organizing of various Black political conventions. We look at the formation of the Black Power movement and its various formations. We look at the forming of the Black Panther Party, the organizing of the Black National Convention. We look at the formation of the Provisional Government of the Republic of New Africa, the formation of the modern day Reparations Movement and in Cobra. And of course, we get to the Black Lives Matter movement. The evolution of the Black response to the uninhibited imposition of white domination is best summarized by our brother, our elder, our ancestor, Malcolm X, who said, "We declare our right on this earth to be a man, to be respected as a man, to be treated as a man, to be given the rights of a human being in this society, on this earth, in this time, which we intend to bring into existence by any means necessary." When we look at what he said, basically what he said was, we intend to reclaim our peoplehood, our African identity by political means, by economic means, by intellectual means, and or by cultural means. And we will defend our right to our identity against anyone who would demonstrate anti-African sentiments, attitudes, and social dictates.
I think you said it all. I think you said it all, brother.
Let me finish with this. Let me
Okay.
finish with this, if I may.
Yes, please.
It is necessary for us to identify one of the 5 injury areas and make that our service area to our community. And peoplehood, nationhood is a great starting point because it touches all the other 4 injury areas. So I say, may the Creator continue to to be graceful to us, and may the answers continue to inspire us to fight for total freedom. Free the land, free the land, free the land.
By any means necessary. Thank you, Brother Licata. I mean, you put it on the table and showing how we are to repair the damage of peoplehood and nationhood, and why and how we lost that determination, this self-determination. So I hope everybody, learn from our professor, Baba Licata. Thank you, Baba Licata. Next, we'll have Brother Cranston Akibalon. Brother Cranston Akibalon will be speaking on the wealth and poverty issue. As you all know, we worked 247 years without a paycheck. That's 12 generations. That means our great grandparents worked from sun up to sundown without a paycheck. And if that loss of income still affects us today. And that's just part of the economic damage. I'm gonna let Brother Cranston speak to that subject. Brother Cranston Akibalon.
Hotel Baba, Hotel panel. Appreciate you all having me in to be able to discuss this injury area. I want to say my first heard about reparations for a good part of my life, but I actually just when the libation was going, we remembered the name of Dr. Imarbi Obadeli, who I call the father of the modern reparations movement, who showed me when I was down in Prairie View when I came in '94, and when I met him during that time when I graduated in '99, and he introduced me to Cobra, and from then on, I've as Brother Licata just alluded to, pick one of the injury areas that I wanted to be able to service our people in, and so mine is definitely economics. In the economic area, I want to cover a few things. Professionally, what I do, I'm a real estate broker, and I build houses. So I look to be able to bring our people up in from there. A lot of what I do is looking back at ancient Kemet. And so we look and see how we built things there. And that's one of the things during the enslavement process that we lost out on. We lost out on the ability to be able to come together, put together action plans, and create something, because we weren't able to. We were constantly having to try to create for other people. So the injury area again that I want to talk about is economic. And I want to read what we have as in Cobra as far as what we see. It says the wealth and poverty, the wealth gap created during the enslavement of African peoples has been sustained throughout. And excuse me, yeah, it has been sustained, and the confiscation of the land and other forms of wealth, Jim Crow, and continuing discrimination in employment, housing, and other economic areas. So that's the extent of the injury. That covers a whole lot. What I'm going to do, part of my presentation, is to be able to talk about FHA, which is, people just hear about FHA, but it's the Federal Housing Authority, to show how the United States government, how the government that we're still as of today doing, that they're doing FHA loans, how they wrote things into what they call their underwriting manual, and on that underwriting manual, it will I'll talk about some of the things that they put in there that were absolute ways to be able to keep Black people from participating. Many people don't necessarily know, or may not look at, that housing, the simple part of housing, is one of the ways that this country and the participants that participate in this experiment they call America gain wealth and equity. And that's how people start off. So we're going to talk about the Federal Housing Administration, what they did. And now first, let me jump back to Wall Street. Now, all of us know about Wall Street. Just had the 100-year anniversary back in last year in May of 19 well, I think it was May the 1st and June the 1st of 1921. They went in and just ravaged one of the areas that we had came together and did for self, practicing that kudu chagalia, that self-determination, practicing that concept of Kwanzaa, of Jama, being able to do our own thing, you know. So they came in and destroyed an absolute town. We go up there every year to be able to commemorate that. It was over 1,000 different properties in that little area that were destroyed, from houses to businesses and everything. And so that was how we were done when we came together to be able to build something. It was an absolute nope, you're not going to participate, and tear it down. So those are, some might say, oh, the vigilantes that are out there doing it. But we know that the United States government did things in. So what we did is just look up and say, well, what exactly did they do? So let me read you something from the underwriting manual of the Federal Housing Administration. This is from an exact quote of what they had. It said that incompatible racial groups should not be permitted to live in the same communities, meaning, of course, you know, this is my interpretation of, meaning that the loans to Black people at that time, you know, they couldn't be insured. So what does that mean? Some people say, well, you know, what the FHA does is they insure the bank. So if the bank is going to give you a loan, they'll come in and insure that loan for, if you happen to default, the government will say, don't worry about it, Mr. Miss Bank, we'll go ahead and pay for it, you know, for this person. So when you have the government ensuring that, that makes the economy be able to flow around. So what they had, and this is something we I thought was pretty interesting when I seen this article, when it was talking about a wall. It had in Detroit, the FHA in Detroit said that there was a nearby community that was being developed, and they said, to develop this, we need to build a 6-foot wall high cement separating this development from a nearby African-American neighborhood to make sure that no African-American could even walk into that particular neighborhood. Now we got to Trump and whatnot today, you know, people, well, as of yesterday, they're talking about build a wall. This is showing like the Federal Housing Administration, back when they were at its inception, part of the underwriting manual, part of what they would use to be able to insure these loans, put language in on things like this. And another part of the manual where they said, we're going to use highways and things to be able to separate out the communities. We talked about Black Wall Street a while ago. There's a highway that runs right through there at Tulsa, Oklahoma now, that basically divided up the neighborhood that doesn't have to have the ability to be able to maintain your wealth. Personally, I'm giving a personal example now. I had to deal with eminent domain I've had a property on I-35 here in Dallas, and literally they came through and said, you know what, we're going to have to take, it was 12 different properties that had to get torn down. Mine was one of them. It was a commercial building, but you know, it was a small commercial building I had where I had my office. And so I'm saying eminent domain is real, and this is how it's real for everyone. And this is how even the government made this for Black people not to be able to participate in this system. And so another part on there where we look at today, let me give some percentages just real quick, and then I want to give a couple other facts. But it said that today, on average, that Blacks make 60% of what whites make. And we have 5% of the wealth that whites have. A lot of that, again, coming in from the FHA. In the 40s, 50s, and 60s, we weren't able to own houses. Now, the same house that was purchased back in 1960, on average, they did a show in San Francisco, it's selling for about $400,000 now. Back then, they may have purchased it for $20,000 or $30,000. That's an extreme amount of wealth to be able to build a business, to be able to do whatever it is that you may want to do. But if you were cut out of that, as Brother Barbara James Rogers just said, for 12 generations, we weren't able to participate in this experiment called America. And so bringing it back even to Dallas here, I went to last week, we were at a program. I have a friend on the city council, Casey Thomas, and they were working with a housing, what do they call it? A racial equity. That's what they call it. They call it a racial equity study, which is nothing but quote unquote affirmative action kind of rehashed. But see, through confusion, that's what they do. They changed up the language to be able to make certain people feel more comfortable. And basically what it does is keep people still confused. So they call it the racial equity study. And on this racial equity study, it showed that, let me bring up here, African Americans, as far as housing homeownership, 28.5%. Latino or Latinx on there, 41.4%. Anglo white, 53.2%. So you can see like we're just right under half of where whites have been. And a lot of it has to do with the things that happened from the FHA and many other discriminatory practices. So this is how we've been injured and set up by the system because we haven't been able to participate. If the easiest way to be able to not have competition is just eliminate it, eliminate the possibility of you competing with me. And so what I'll say a couple of things that we could do because the study went through, it's pretty comprehensive. It dealt with things like NIMBYs, like not in my backyard, where you have things in the Black community where like if you have a trash, the dumps and other stuff, they have that. They talk about that in the study about the NIMBYs, not in my backyard, where things were systematically moved to certain areas. So the study is comprehensive, and it was again done by the city of Dallas, called a racial equity study. If anybody wants to see it, but that's present day to be able to show still what we're going through in 2022. So what can we do? One thing we could do is listen to people like Dr. Claude Anderson, those great economic minds that be able to show you how to be able to put a plan in place, regardless. And I'll even use that new word they put in definition, irregardless, because so many of our people used it. They actually added into the dictionary, irregardless of what's going on out in the so-called greater economy. We can band together and put back those places like Black Wall Street and things that we used to do if we come together in like that and follow the powernomic system that like Dr. Claude Anderson, many other genius, Dr. Boyce Watkins, and many other people that are economic giants out here as far as information is concerned. That's how we can be able to start to look at our personal situation. Of course, we're going to be dealing with reparations because we were taken from Africa for economic means. We need to be repaired economically. That's going to be absolute. But what I want to talk about is, of course, we fight then for reparations and what we're looking to the government to do from the harm that they committed against us. At the same time, what can we do ourselves to be able to move us forward? And so if we look at done, it was an injury area of damages, just like in court. When you say sorry, you have to do sorry. They came with the hollow apology before of, hey, enslavement was wrong, this and that. And now you're getting a lot of buzzwords about reparations. Every time there's a political election, you'll get that word reparations, thrown in there. So we have to keep at it and pump it up to be able to make for sure that this particular area of economics can be repaired fully by us getting complete reparations. After we take the plebiscite, as Dr. Mario Obedelli always told us, take the plebiscite of the people, see where we need to be able to utilize the money, get the full and complete reparations, and continue to be able to follow the powernomics and other things with our economic giants that are telling us how to restore ourselves as we continue to be able to work on reparations.
Well, thank you, brother. That was, again, real thorough. And I remember Barbara Hannibal once telling me that the poverty issue is probably the strongest issue to resolve, because from throughout time, we've had poor people, and because of our enslavement, we have more poor people on the street begging, homeless people. So I'm gonna go ahead and kind of shift the program just a little bit so one of our moderators in the second panel can make her remarks, and that's Sister Haynes. I've not met her before. However, she will be talking about organizing in the injured party community. How do we organize ourselves in this community of harm? And I think she's going to share a screen and talk with you for a minute. Go ahead, Sister Haynes.
Yes, are you able to see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you. Just to give a brief introduction, my name is Shemaya Haynes, and I have been organizing for well over 30 years, mostly alongside my mom, Claudia Fatima Smith Peary, and she has been my top educator in terms of community organizing And for that duration, she's been firm on reparations and the need for that. I'm thankful to be able to come to you today and speak more about organizing about reparations. I'm the co-chair of the Poor People's Campaign Southern Piedmont Circle, which is located here in Charlotte, North Carolina, where I reside. And I'm the founder of the Charlotte Community Think Tank, where we look for solutions in education for our most marginalized children who, let's name it, that's Black children. So reparations and why we need to organize in the impacted communities. First of all, our communities that are most impacted are often the most disenfranchised. And that disenfranchised comes from the modern day oppression itself. It comes from the mental and physical abuse that we experienced in the transatlantic slave trade, and then on to America throughout the plantation and all of those things that took place with us. Our impacted communities now more than ever are at the height of disenfranchisement. And therefore we need to stop reaching for the low-lying fruit. We need to get into our communities and express to our folks that, listen, if you want out of this, you cannot pray your way out of it. You can't beg your way out of it. It's time for you to take a stand and move on something that's going to give you the economic freedom that you deserve. I have been speaking about reparations quite a bit over the last year. And the one thing that I tell people, you ain't got to like me, but darn it, I want my money. I want my payment. I want my economic freedom that is my inheritance. I want everything that I'm supposed to get, and in reality, reparations is a small ask considering you can't even give your life for what you did to Africans. So our task here is not one that's going to be easy, mainly because our people have gotten to be so engaged in work for small wages and essentially part 3, 4, or 5 of slavery, that they're too tired to even think about what it looks like to be free and to have liberation. It's a big task, but it is what is absolutely necessary in order for us to get and build our base for reparations and the support thereof. Members of our impacted communities must be ready to be prepared and accept their newly found economic opportunity. Part of what we must do is we must begin to mobilize our impacted community members, because at the end of the day, we can offer them a check, education, and all of those things. But again, we've been oppressed for a very long time. Now, please don't confuse this statement to mean that before we offer a check, we need to do all these things. The idea here is to understand and have the knowledge to know that we could possibly be turning people over to more oppression if we're not careful. The brother spoke about FHA and their practices. There's also something called redlining, where we were put into these ghettos and not sold property to unless it was in these said ghettos. And what happened there was, in other words, this country has a way of using our own oppression against us, even economically. Okay, we wanted to buy homes in the 2000s. And so they said, yeah, you can buy a home. Now we're going to charge you double and inflate your mortgages and do all of those things. So the gains that we had actually went right back to our very oppressors who had so-called offered us something. So we got to make sure that we are organizing with our impacted communities, even prior to ever receiving reparations, so that they are well prepared and poised to accept that and understand what is necessary to continue that financial freedom, liberation, and momentum. 3, we need our impacted community members to take ownership of their salvation and their destiny. And what we mean by this is if we, the folks who are aware of the power of reparations, that we are properly owed reparations, that we may or may not be more educated than, I should say formally educated than some. We may not actually be in poverty ourselves. We should not be fighting this battle for the folks who are the most impacted. We need to be fighting with one another across social economic lines, across skin color lines, across all of these different lines that have been created through oppression. This is an important aspect because our people have been conditioned to allow people to fight for them, not with them, for them. And what has been the outcome of that? More oppression, less liberation, less freedom, less justice. And so these things are the top 3 things that need to take place, and also to create a strong case for why we need to move not only within our communities of consciousness, not only within those brothers and sisters who speak the same, who speak our language in terms of our consciousness or formal education, but to get back to where the majority of our people are. In the civil rights movement, the people who really sparked that movement were the people who did not have very much to lose in the first place. They had decided that their oppression was greater than the little maid job that they had, or the janitorial position that they had, or the ditch digging position, or whatever it was. And we have to move back into that. We have to make a case to our people that if you tired of digging that ditch, here's your answer. If you tired of a sister on the corporate job, if you tired of doing 3 people's job, and yeah, you might be making decent money, but they making 3 times more than you to do less than you. We got to create that case for our people. And we got to create that case for those who are most impacted, the poor, the marginalized, heavily marginalized. To be Black and to be poor is the status of the majority of our people, despite those of us who get through the cracks. And so I am very passionate about reparations, the need for America to fulfill its moral obligation, duty, and responsibility to Africans and their descendants who were in slavery. And I could go on and on all day and night. And of course, I know there are points here that I meant to make that I did not make because of my passion, but I'm grateful to be in this discussion. And I know that we have a long way to go in terms of where we need to be. And so personally, not only for my mom and all of the things that she's organized around, I am going to make sure that Cobra has a chapter here in Charlotte, North Carolina. And that is my commitment to this organization, this group, and a challenge because of all the things that I just mentioned. Thank you so much, brothers and sisters, for this opportunity. I'm very appreciative.
Wow. We want to thank you again for letting us know and informing us about the organizing in the injured party community. While you were talking, I was thinking of something that Kwame Ture said, and he would say it all the time: organize, organize, organize. So we want to thank you again and appreciate you being a part of this teaching. And you can turn your screen off if you want, so that we can allow the next speaker to have that space. We're gonna go back to the 5 injury areas, and we're gonna start back with the injury of health and the harm that has been done to us. Like I said, from working for 200 years from sunup to sundown, and how that terror has harmed us as a people. And so we're going to go with Sister Victoria, and she's going to give us some information about the harm area and the health area.
All right, greetings to everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes, we do.
All right. My name is Victoria Strawn, and I always tell people, please just call me Victoria or Sister V. I always hold up the peace sign. That just came from the fact that a lot of people couldn't get Victoria straight too much. So Sister V it works for me. I reside in Cincinnati, Ohio, and I'm the chair of the Cincinnati Northern Kentucky chapter of NCOBRA. And it has been, I would say, revived because we had one several years ago. And so there was a need to bring it back. Also the co-founder of Concerned Citizens for Justice in Cincinnati, long-term advocate for justice of the community, long-term advocate for reparations of our people. And I've never wavered on that. I've been knowing Queen Mother Fatima for well over 25, almost 30 years now. And, you know, she's been mothering me through this process. Sometimes some of us, especially when I met her, I was a bit younger, and we just have that sort of that wild fight going on in us. And she has showed me how to kind of harness that fight and help steer and guide and direct me. And I thank her for that. But let me get into this. I had already mentioned I worked in clinical research. And so some of this area is near and dear to me, as I have often worked in areas where I would do organizing in the community to get our people to begin to look at our health indicators and what that means. And so I stayed up quite late last night looking at the harm report, which if there are people who haven't seen the harm report, this is a very important document. A lot of it focuses on whether or not there's transgenerational harm done to us. And I think after I get through speaking, I hope that you will agree with me that the answer is yes. Let me start first to say with Dr. King's quote, of all forms of inequity, injustice, and healthcare is the most shocking and inhumane. As the harm report states about historical trauma that's been defined as an event that are so widespread as to affect an entire culture. I think all would agree on that. When you start looking at epigenetics, because there's a great portion of the document that does focus on some studies that have been done where they're looking at transgenerational, whether things can be passed down. Well, the study of epigenetics, and it talks about that a lot, that studies how your behaviors and environment can cause changes that affect the way your genes work. Gene expression can be prevented. In other words, your genes can be harmed. And the harm and changing of those genes can then be passed down generationally. Let's talk about some areas of stress. When we have stress, and this goes along with what Dr. Joy Leary talks about in her book, Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome, and her work in slave syndrome. But in it, we have to acknowledge the stressors that we have as a people just on a day-to-day basis, just trying to live in this racist society that we live in. Our health today is affected by our environment we live in. Therefore, what we have are enzymes that are really designed to really help us deal with stress and trauma when it's put upon us or when it's presented. But these enzymes were never designed for us to stay in a heightened state of fear and trauma. So what happens with these enzymes that are released into our bloodstream, such as cortisol, that's supposed to be there, but it also is one of those things where it's supposed to help us be able to process whether it's going to be flight or fright. But when these enzymes stay on high in our systems, it can begin to cause problems. In other words, you start to have a breaking down of systems within the body. So we have to begin to look at what happens when these stressors begin to break down. Over a long period of time, and consistently begins to produce glucose in some, leading to increased blood sugar levels. Haven't we all heard that our people have diabetes? We have sugar problems. When you look at the stressor, the enzyme, it attacks, there are certain enzymes that attack synaptic molecule leading to cognitive impairment. What that means is we're electrical. And so when we have these stressors that attack these molecules, these are things that happen to talk to our nerve system. So our nervous system begins to get affected when these things happen. And so there's a study that I found that says, and this is interesting, the summary of the study says, why is it important that when people are too stressed, they're often grumpy, grouchy, nasty, distracted, and or forgetful? Researchers have just highlighted a fundamental synaptic mechanism that explains the relationship between chronic stress and the loss of social skills and cognitive impairment. When triggered by stress, an enzyme attacks synaptic regulatory molecules in the brain. In other words, again, these electrical impulses leading to these problems. And then when you look at high cortisol levels, again, these enzymes are really good for us, but they were never designed to stay on full blast 24/7. So when these cortisol levels run high, there's some things that it says it does affect: diabetes, digestive disorders, heart disease, immune dysfunction, rapid weight gain. We have all of that running through our communities today, and very often not even knowing where some of these illnesses are coming from, or rather there are people who don't want to admit that stress plays a huge part in our overall health. When you look at some of the stress factors that go into our system, when you look at women who are pregnant, Black women, we've all heard that women are dying, Black women are dying in childbirth at a much higher rate than our white counterpart. This is very serious because, again, we're looking at racial bias in the medical field, which they are just scratching the surface of admitting to these things. I know a personal situation where my niece was sent home. She really felt that she couldn't see, something was affecting her vision. But it took a strong mother who happened to be an LPN, my sister, who said, hold on, something's not right, took her daughter right back to the emergency room. Her blood pressure levels were sky high and she never should have been released. But this is some of what's happening, as an example, this is some of what's happening. We also know that many of our Black women are left in childbirth labor for too long, and eventually begins to hurt not only her health, but the health of her child. And so we look at also the infant mortality rates. I know here in Cincinnati, we were appalled to find out, and this was over 20 years ago, we had infant mortality rates in our city that mirrored third world countries by all studies and by all numbers. This just should not be happening here in America. We also want to look at the fact that 62% of Black women, African Americans, and the majority of our working class, again, and they look at some of the socioeconomic factors that our patients and our people are living in, all contribute to this. It contributes to the stress. And then what stress then begins to do to the body, it begins to break the body down, releases free radicals and so forth. And then you start having inflammation, which then leads to arthritis. And also, especially with Black women, we tend to come down with more immune dysfunction than our white counterpart. We also have to look at some areas again with respect to research. Research has been chronicled quite nicely in a book called Medical Apartheid. And if you all don't know about this book or have never seen it, it's a troubling read. I'll put it like that. It took me a long time to read that book because you have to stop and really take it in and deal with your emotions as you're reading it. But it not only outlines the story that we all talk about, and most people know about, is the Tuskegee experiment. That was one in many medical exploits that took place on Black people. But it also plays into the narrative that these things began from the day we came over. It started the trauma, the visual trauma, the physical trauma started in the slave trade in the Middle Passage. All of that started there, and it continues to this day. So you have the Tuskegee experiment that everybody knows about, but you also have to look at the radiation experiments that took place here in Cincinnati. I don't know if very many people are familiar with those radiation experiments. Many people were not consented. Many people did not know what they were getting into and asked to do, but we did find out that 62%, it was a small study of about 90 people, but 62% of them were Black, okay? And so when you look at these types of things that went on, we also have the story of Henrietta Lacks. Henrietta Lacks in 1951, this book here, if you know about her story, it just came to light in the last few years. And so if you look at Johns Hopkins, made millions. They became the big giants in medical to this day, off of her sales, off of her Black sales while her children lived in squalor. This Dr. Marion Sims, I could go on, Dr. Marion Sims, supposed to be the father of gynecology. Well, if you look at the things that he did in the famous picture that everybody knows about or looks at, which is the Black lady sitting there looking very subservient. Well, the experiments that were performed on her and others without any kind of anesthesia whatsoever. And there are 3 ladies who names are Lucy, Betsy, and Anarcha, were the ones that they used very often to do their dastardly experiments. I go on further to talk about this other thing called a broken heart syndrome. It's called Takotsubo. And this is a medical definition of a broken heart. And so we look at all the people that we're losing in our environment, the violence that our kids are growing up in. We also have the ACE test that you look at. And in this ACE test, that it also reveals about negative outcomes. And it looks at the things that lead into negative outcomes. Now, when you look at the health part, it's got obesity, diabetes, respiratory problems, and cancer. These are all the things that our people are plagued with on a daily basis. But when I'm gonna go back to the broken heart syndrome, which is interesting to me because it's not just mothers that are losing their sons and daughters at this point, but we also have a high incarceration rate, which is also part of the broken heart syndrome as well. And this thing talks specifically about how it breaks down and affects the heart. And it also messes with blood issues like blood pressure and circulation issues as well. And if these things aren't repaired or not noticed there in terms of the grieving process, it can become worse. I can talk about countless people who have stents, but the broken heart syndrome can also lead to asthma attacks. That's off the chain in our community. Loss of loved ones that can spark this. And again, these are things that are real and are studied. And so we have the information that we need. When Dr. Joy Leary talked about post-traumatic slave syndrome, she outlined the things that lead to this that we still carry with us today. We also have to look at, again, all the totality of what is being studied and how it breaks down into our DNA and changes the way we operate. It changes who we are, but it does it as a means of survival. But that at the end of the day, we are being genetically changed by all the trauma and stress that we have seen and have to endure. I will leave you with this. It takes it all the way up to COVID. When COVID first broke, they admitted it was Black people that was dying in those hospitals, most of it from neglect. If you do not know this lady's name, please say her name, Dr. Susan Moore. I would urge all of you all to just YouTube her. She was in the hospital, a medical doctor, chronicled, because she didn't have any other device, because as you know, they weren't letting people in at that time. She chronicled exactly what they were doing to her by ignoring her signs and symptoms. And this woman chronicled how that was happening and how disrespected she felt. And the threats that she got from those white doctors is, how dare you, Black woman, tell me or suggest to us how to treat you? This woman ultimately died. So if you haven't seen her study, you must see it, because it will let you know that this is still going on to this day. And oftentimes we are dying in these institutions, in these medical institutions, and they just write it off as, we died of a heart attack, or we died of this and that. But we really have to look deeply at these cases, because we are dying, not because we're not going to the doctors. It's not that we're not a caring people and don't care about ourselves physically, mentally, or emotionally, because we do. But when you look at the medical bias that continues to this day, we are not getting the diagnosis or the treatment that we should be getting. And it was outlined very well with Dr. Susan Moore. And so I'll yield at that. There's more I could say, but I believe that we have been studied enough to know that this is being passed down transgenerationally. As they will tell you that high blood pressure gets passed down, or diabetes, they know that this has changed our DNA to the point where it comes out in our future offspring. I thank you for listening.
Wow, broken heart syndrome. It actually is stress that's killing us.
Yes.
Never heard of that one. That's great. And I think someone put in the chat that you can read about the harm report on the NCOBRA website. One of the authors of that report is here with us today, Brother Cam Howard. However, he will be speaking on some other topics later on. We're going to keep it moving. Again, Sister, I want to say thank you for that thorough report on the health injury. And while you was talking, I'm thinking about how we're underinsured. Most of us don't have health insurance, so we can't get the treatment that we actually deserve. And sometimes, like you said, when we do go to the doctor, we're misdiagnosed and underdiagnosed and undertreated. So the harm is real. It's affecting all of us, and some more than others. So thank you very much for that report. This is a teaching, and I think it would be very, very positive for us to have a teacher talk to us now. And we're going to do that with Professor Melville. He's going to talk about the education harm that we have suffered from slavery until today, and what should the reparation remedy be? Brother Melville.
Thank you so much for having me. I want to talk about several things in regards to education. One of the injury areas, as we look back at our history as a people here, and we see the government's role in the damage done by the government and those from colonial times, all the way to the formation of the United States, all of these sanctions perpetrated against African people, my people, we must realize that this damage is damages that were in shape of mental trauma and psychological trauma. The challenges of the African, stripping him from his name, his culture, putting him in a situation in order to take upon the ways of Europeans. And then when we talk about this from an informal education to a formal education, how do we repair this? First, we must acknowledge these things were done. And that's why in this country right now, there's such a push right now to challenge the fact that these things were not done. And so we have to look at the education of our young people, the education of all of our people, regardless of what generation they're a part of, and make sure that we continue to emphasize what has taken place. That is important. That historical knowledge has to be continued. We have to continue to fight for the fact that we must continue to re-educate ourselves on what was done to us in order for us to repair the damage that to ourselves. And the government must be held accountable for the damages that were done to African people in these United States of America. Okay, and this is part of this this whole notion of reparations, the acknowledgement of what you have done. Okay, the acknowledgement of what you've done to our ancestors and what you continue to do to this day. Your systems that were created, all advantageous to white Americans, all based upon the premise of white supremacy, this false notion of white supremacy, all for the whole purpose of white comfort. And this is why we must challenge these people attack on true history. And we must fight in the school system, whether it's here in Texas or wherever it is at. We must fight so that our young people will continue to learn what has taken place, what is continuing, what is going on right now. And this is the fight that we have right now. So there's two things that are happening. The need for the recognition of what had happened in the past, and a fight to recognize what is taking place right now, okay? And to understand the mental and psychological trauma that a couple other individuals have mentioned so far that needs to take place. Now, what has to happen in order to make sure that we do this is to write down, to document, to lay out what those damages, what really happened, what really transpired, and to talk about these things in forums and in meetings in our communities, to constantly emphasize these things, not to make sure that people are not let off the hook. You know, America has a responsibility, has to be held accountable for these damages perpetrated against the African American community, against African people here in these United States of America. Okay, and for so long we have allowed them to say that they're teaching history in our schools. You're teaching white American history. You're not teaching the history and the damages that were done against Native American indigenous people. You're not teaching the history and the damages that were done, all this infliction and all this trauma that was done against African people in this country. You're teaching white American history from a perspective that makes themselves comfortable. It's all about white comfort. Every system, whether it's the hospital system, healthcare system, every system we have in this country, it has been created for the purpose of white comfort and white privilege. Every system. And this is why they don't want us to discuss these things. They don't want us to have these type of forums. They want to limit us to what we have to talk about. And this is why these type of forums and these type of meetings and gatherings are of importance, because every one of us have something that is important for us to hear. We have to continue to discuss these matters, okay? And I know as an educator for over 20 years, I've discussed this in my classroom, and I made it very evident to my students that this is why we have so much problems in our community, because they did everything to attack African and Black consciousness in our community, everything, okay? And we must defend ourselves from this frontal assault by those who are in high office and in government who have talked about all this CRT and all these other things. And we must continue to have these forums, these discussions, whether formally or informally within our communities. And I think that is part of the whole notion of repairing the damages in terms of education, okay? And I think people think that you're educated because you have a degree or a title, but education is a process in which individual, as W.B. Du Bois says, understand the society, is able to contribute to the society. And some of our young people today, they do not understand who they are. They have a lack of knowledge of self, and they do not know what their obligations are, what we owe our ancestors to. We must continue to fight.
Thank you, Professor Melville. That's we're facing this every day with this fight against they call it the critical race theory, where they want not their children not to learn about the racist roots of America and Western society. So we're facing this on a daily basis, and our children are being miseducated, uneducated about their own history and culture. But I'm sure you at Prairie View and A&M University is doing your part to enlighten our students. So we want to thank you for that report. And so we have work to do in the field of education to fight for a better education for our children.
And by the way, we are still working on trying to get the chapter here in Houston reestablished, but in Cobra as well.
Great, great. And I still want to extend my hand to help in any kind of way. We also have one of your alumni, Brother Akibalon, on this call. So I'm sure he'll be glad to help you also.
Absolutely.
And
Great.
Absolutely.
that's Brother Akibalon, Cranston Akibalon right there. He was in Dr. Obadiah's class there at
All right.
Prairie View. So we're gonna go on and keep it moving and talk about the harm of criminal justice. And that is one that's in our face every day. The criminal justice, how Brother called it the criminal justice system. It's actually a criminal system itself. And so we have Sister Crystal Muhammad on the call that we're going to talk about the criminal punishment aspect of our enslavement. Crystal Muhammad.
Black power, brothers and sisters, black power.
Black power.
Free the land, Uhuru, Hotep, all of the above. I believe Mother Fatima is going to be working with me with sharing my PowerPoint presentation in regards to the Criminal Justice Forum. I want to thank Cobra and all of its distinguished and very powerful panelists. I personally have been a supporter of reparations since the early 90s. As a student at Texas Southern, myself and several students used to drive down to Prairie View to visit with Dr. Imari Obadiah. We wish we had such a program or such a gentleman like that on campus. And later on in the years, I would travel to meet with him in person in Baton Rouge. So with that being said, the history and the work of reparations is very much important towards me. Many of you who are on this panel right now, Brother James Rogers, Lady Nelson, have been some of my mentors along the years. So right now we have this presentation. I'm going to start with just making a statement on behalf of the New Black Panther Party that reparations is very much a part of our 9 local objectives. In fact, it is not our 9th local objective. I want to read that we demand local reparation and compensation. We affirm that the governments, corporations, and white private citizens of the region have willfully, intentionally, and recklessly enslaved, discriminated against, robbed, and disenfranchised our people in countless and innumerable ways. We affirm that the same entity's wealth in the region is rooted in the slave trade system and currently profits from contemporary racism and disenfranchised. We thereby demand that the guilty parties relinquish billions and trillions of dollars owed in the finance, land, and other necessary supplies as partial reparations to partially compensate for over 400 years of slavery, discrimination, racism, brutality, robbery, theft, land stealing, suffering, death, physical and mental injuries, general abuse, defamation, slander, and a host of other of the worst crimes against humanity in a broad magnitude. We demand that the use of these partial compensatory damages for the institution of rebuilding the Black nation and communities with absolutely no strings attached. And we fully support all national reparations movement and call on all Black organizations to fight for reparations by any means necessary. I just want to make that point, and we can go ahead and move forward because this is very key, just as important as the criminal justice system. this criminal injustice system, we can go ahead and start sliding to these pictures. The criminal so-called injustice system, next picture, is a continuation, another form of chattel slavery. Keep next picture. Next picture. Next picture. All right, I want to start in before the so-called abolition of slavery. The so-called abolition of slavery. In the Dred Scott case, the Supreme Court ruled that Black men, women included, whether free or enslaved, had no white rights which the white man was bound to respect. That's the Supreme Court. The Dred Scott case has never been overturned. Dred Scott is still very much in effect in 2022. We will prove this point. All levels of government, from the executive, judicial, and legislative, are not only responsible for the laws that led to their naval ships and private citizens enslaving our people to today. Next slide, please. The 13th Amendment, 1865. This is to allegedly have abolished slavery. But let's be clear of what it says here. Neither slave nor involuntary servitude, except for punishment for a crime, whereof the party shall be duly convicted, shall exist within the United States or any other place within its jurisdiction. And Congress shall have power to enforce this article by appropriate legislature. This little section, this one statement, not even a complete statement, that so-called abolished slavery, neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except for punishment for a crime. This is the catch-22. This is the trigonology. This is the sleight of hand that allowed slavery to continue as it is today. And we hold that the United States government is to be responsible for the appropriate appropriations of legislature, whatever, and the private citizens, because we know that the United States government is a compilation of individual citizens, corporations, fictitious structure, but we can trace it back by families, by corporations, and even up until today. Next slide, please. After the so-called 13th Amendment, now mind you, we just said less than 10 years before the 13th Amendment, the Dred Scott case, that was the judicial system. Now we had the so-called abolition by the legislature, but here, locally, federally, across the South and other nations, immediately the Black codes were put into effect. And the Black code said that, oh, this pop-up button got in my way. Okay, the Black codes were turned out to be laws in which white Southerners would attempt to maintain their ways of life after the Civil War, while freedom had been won, ex-slaves were restricted and opportunities were limited. Next slide, please. Black codes. I'm gonna give a few examples. You cannot own property or guns as a slave or so-called free person of slavery. Part of the Black codes. This is still in effect today. Voting rights were obstructed, of course, by men at first and then by women. Still, we deal with this to today. In 2022, we have cities and legislators still talking about so-called voting rights. If you did not have a job, you would be arrested and forced to work for no pay. What is work for no pay but slavery? Some other examples of the Black codes. You were prohibited from marrying Of course, you were also prohibited from marrying a white person. You were prohibited from publicly fraternizing, from being buried in cemeteries, whites only cemeteries, prohibited from schools, transportation, freedom over, it's a little blurry. This is a list of this things to disenfranchise you. Being able to read, being able to write, own property. Now, these black codes were codified, I believe that's the terminology, by ordinances and legislatures that would take the most minute infractions and put you into what's called not slavery, but convict leasing, which is still in effect today, which gives rise to the prison industrial complex. And it still is in effect to today. It never ended. Convict leasing, concentration camps, forced labor, where Africans still continue to be rebuilding and contributing to the economy. Even to today, someone incarcerated, they only receive 17 cents an hour, if that, 17 cents an hour, if that. And then many of these prisons, private, federal, and state, charge you for every little thing that you do. Next slide, please. Next slide. Children. Look at this young child. Look how they did this young child. And they're still doing this today. Next slide, please. Look at all these babies. This is still happening today. We built the infrastructure of this nation. They used chattel slavery, convict leasing to build the railroads, the cotton. We can stop right here. This system of trauma. And this is white so-called folks out in their, look at that, they got on their Sunday best. They're dressed from top to bottom in their Sunday best while lynching a black man in front of the courthouse. I believe this picture is in Paris, Texas, if I'm not mistaken. And we just got through dealing with a lynching in Paris, Texas of Brandon McClelland in 2009. No justice for this man lynched here, nor the young brother Brandon McClelland lynched in 2009 in Paris, Texas. Still, the white man does not recognize any rights of our black people, our humanity. And the so-called criminal injustice system is their main tool, even to today, to keep up not only disparaging economics, but it is also a system of eugenics. Next slide, please. There's so much to say. Emmett Till, beautiful child. The phases of slavery, direct chattel slavery, Jim Crow, the prison industrial complex of today. Slavery has never ended. It was just shifted. It was a sleight of hand. The economic and social conditions were created by the black codes and the economic disparities that still exist today. Crime is a direct result of poverty. When the last time you had a pocket full of money and went and robbed someone? Or just not saying any of us would, but someone who has all the things that they need would be less likely to commit a crime, unless of course you're a big corporate, rich guy who does grand larceny and robs whole nations, whole people. Next slide, please. The school to prison pipeline. We showed the young children earlier who were in the slave concentration camps, convict leasing camps back in the day, but it still goes on today. You go into the school system, you walk in many of the school systems, they, in some cities, have security checkpoints. Most of these, if you drive by a school today, these new structures, they look or designed the same way as some of these prisons, even by the architecture. These are different statistics, and I'll share the slide. I'm working on a time limit. I'll share this PowerPoint. I'm working on a time limit, but the statistics are all over the place. I just Googled most of these images. It has been determined that these people have written books about how they will determine how they would fill the prisons based on how many children can read by 3rd grade. So it is in stop. Well, I wish we could go back, but this just happened in 2020. But we're gonna leave this right here. Same as with Emmett Till. I wish we could go back, but it's still the same. The school to prison pipeline. They will enslave our children. They will incarcerate our children, and they will lynch our children. It has not stopped. This young child was taken from his home by white adults, coerced by their young son in Iberia Parish, right outside of Lafayette. He was sexually abused, beaten, and thrown in a sugarcane field. Did the courts do anything? No. You know what the sheriffs did? They let the white folks leave. We had to raise holy hell, bring in all kind of troops, from INFACT to the New Black Panther Party to all over Lafayette. Go to the governor's mansion. We were confronted by white militias who leveled rifles at us. And we had to let them know we have our own rifles. And they had to get their behinds on. They thought they were going to go bully the people. We went before the Louisiana State Legislature, Attorney General, to the governor's mansion. Still today, no justice. Next slide, please. There is Sandra Bland. We know what happened to Sandra Bland. Driving while black, heading to Prairie View, never made it home. In the jail system, so-called criminal justice system, another lynching. Next slide, please. Alfred Wright in Jasper, Texas. Look at his image to the right. These wicked people snatched him, decapitated, took his eyes out, pulled his teeth out, sliced them up, and the racist pigs said he died from a drug overdose. This is 2014. Next slide. Mississippi, Otis Bird in 2015. The brother did 26 years in prison for a crime he said he never committed. He was accused of killing a white lady. This picture right here, he was hung in the backyard of the family of this white lady. 15 feet in the air with his hands behind his back. They said he hung himself. He allegedly left his house, his own home. There is no justice. This criminal injustice system, not one court from Texas to Louisiana to Mississippi, not one district attorney pressed charges in either of these cases. Not one. No state attorney. These have went all the way up to the Department of Justice. The so-called FBI says they're quote unquote investigating these cases. Next slide, please. This young man, Willie Jones Jr., was hung in 2018 in Mississippi in the front yard of the white folks who he had a baby from, and they came and got him from his house, in a house full from the mama, grandma, grandpa, baby's mama, and all of their brothers. They beat him, hung him in the front yard, house full of people. They said he hung himself. Nothing done about it. The Department of Justice, so-called Department of Justice. Some of this was under Obama and Trump. It doesn't matter. From the highest level of the system, executive, legislative, we've hit them all. City council, no justice.
Next slide, please. These two young men in Mississippi, 2017, Mississippi was going on a rampage from the Otisburg from 2014, 15 to Willie Jones. These two brothers, went 2017. The brother to the right with the little Wu-Tang shirt, he was hung in his backyard after getting into it with a white girl. She said she saw him walking in the back with his backpack, with a rope. But they had just had a dog cat fight, hung in his own backyard in Jackson, Mississippi, the capital. And as we were out fighting and demonstrating for justice for this young man, we left to go deal with another issue in New Jersey. And we were called and told that this man with the red shirt on, head was found on a porch in Jackson, Mississippi, but his body was set afire blocks away. They claim it's drug related. No justice. Next slide. We all know Big George Floyd, Houston, Texas. He went to school with my brother, right here in 3rd Ward. Murdered, cold-blooded, choked out. We saw the police with his knee on his front, on his neck, but the other cops had their knee on his back. We had to dang near burn this nation down. And it still has been no justice for George Floyd. Those cops got a slap on the hand, a clear case for reparations. How many George Floyds are there? This was caught on camera. Next slide. After they start seeing Breonna Taylor, another beautiful soul. They don't discriminate. Man, woman, or child. There is no justice in this so-called criminal justice system. The injuries are numerous. The millions and millions and millions. America doesn't have the money to pay us, but we want everything they got. Do you understand? No distractions. Talking about the harm, the injuries, the trauma. Next slide, please. And yes, let us be clear. We want our reparations now. And on our watch, we will do everything it takes. No compromises. I've been watching, doing my research. It's a lot of slickness going on. They got 11 cities that so-called are having reparations commission, but they're just scraps being thrown. Evanston, Illinois, giving $25,000 for housing deposits. We need to watch the games that are being played in these commissions. And that's the point I want to say. And not let them try to water down, because all of these commissions are coming about when the people start uprising. We need to make sure that we do not allow anyone to compromise or have any deals that are giving lip service to true reparations, that it is deserved. What are the things that we can do in regards to the injuries of the criminal justice so-called system? Every state and city and federal government needs to allocate a significant amount of its revenue from its police, sheriff, and court systems. A significant amount. We need to look at the books and reroute and reallocate those funds towards our communities and our people. We need to have, and I'm saying, we can run some numbers. I don't want to put the numbers because that's not my job, but I'm saying a significant amount, over 50% of the budget. There needs to be an immediate release of all nonviolent offenders in these prison systems. The police patrol our communities like Nazis. There needs to be rules on where these pigs are coming from. Most of the time, which we have found out, they don't come from our communities. They recruit from other towns, and they don't play where they lay. If you're gonna patrol in our community, you have to live in our community. We need to be able to put our eyes on you. Business redevelopment grants, all of the resources, every city, every state in this country retain this wealth
from our ancestors. There's no doubt about it. The previous presenters have discussed this, but it's being perpetuated. The system of slavery through the so-called crime system, which is being manipulated by the economic setup. And we need to make sure that we put some concrete policies in place. Let's go to these city governments and create some models. Even we have to have a template, to have some teeth in it.
Sister
Because
Crystal.
our politics is at home. And I know I gotta go.
Yeah, we kind of
Our
winding
politics
down.
starts right here at home. In our cities where we're at. Black Power. Thank you, Brother James.
Black Power, sister. We want to thank you for being so thorough
That was beautiful.
on this criminal justice system.
May I say something? I just wanted people, while we're in the moment, Sister Crystal, that was wonderful. Just
Thank
in the
you.
moment when she was going through her slides, did your pulse, did you start pulsating? Did you pulse? Did you feel your body temperature going up?
Did I feel my body temperature? I felt tears coming down my eyes.
I'm
Yes,
asking
ma'am.
just everybody in general.
everybody. Yes, ma'am.
Nobody need to like really comment, but
Okay.
but that goes to the trauma, just watching it. If people felt some type of way pulsing through their veins, that's what we're talking about when we talk about this thing is changing us, our very DNA, because we have to live with looking at this stuff all the time. So I wanted to say that.
Yes,
Wonderful
you're
point.
so right. It did affect me very much when to see the young boy, or just to see people being lynched today, and the criminal justice system is doing nothing about it. We are supposed to close down at 5 o'clock. However, we do have 2 other presentations, and we're going to try to get them in. We may have to go over a little bit if y'all don't mind, but we're going to start off with our brother Cam Howard. And Brother Cam was going to talk about local reparations initiative, something Sister Crystal was just hitting on, how we need to force these local governments and others to pay reparations, and how we should be organizing ourselves to make that happen. And Brother Cam, we also have one of our commissioners of the youth department, or the youth commission, online with us, Sister Lily X, and she wanted to share some of your time with you, talking about local initiatives. Brother Cam?
Oh, that's cool. Definitely don't have a problem with that. First, let me just say that you might have put too much power into this presentation, to this day's teaching, because you had, some powerful presenters come before me, and I'm going to be brief. But first, to Brother Lucada, let me say I am a conscious citizen of the Republic of New Africa. I just so definitely was vibing with your presentation. To Brother Cranston, brother, you said Barbara Omari was the father of the modern reparations movement, and absolutely, totally correct. But if you're a father, and if you're a father, that means that you have children. We are the children, but you can't have a child unless it comes through a father and a mother. So we know that the mother of the modern reparations movement is Queen Mother Dorothy Ben Lewis, I would say. So we always want to raise them both up together. Sister Shemaye, powerful community organizing piece. We ask you to, if you can tune in to our community organizing classes that we have. After they conclude, we'll definitely be going into another series of organizing classes. And that may be something that you can, pull from here and let us know what we need, and then host those and run those other classes that we'll be needing going forward, particularly on how we prepare our community for reparations. That's extremely important. Sister Victoria, thank you so much for reading the Harm Report and marrying it to your existing knowledge, and then educating us even further. We had the Harm Report commission to speak to white liberals. That was a target as we continue to try to build our allies in this movement. Another particular target was Black professionals in the healing space, like yourself, so that you could actually, again, bring your knowledge base to this and validate what we put in the report. Again, raising the consciousness of our community even higher. And then the final target of the harm report was brothers and sisters in general who could then take this information and begin to change their own life, because we do know that we can mitigate the effects of this historical trauma. It doesn't have to be passed on generationally, but if we don't know that it exists, we're going to continue to pass it on generationally. So thank you, sister, for bringing that knowledge out. Dr. Malveaux, brother professor, again, thank you for rising up and stating that in Houston, you're going to reestablish that chapter. We're talking with the National Black United Front. We're doing some local reparations as public safety initiatives around the country. So we have about 12 cities, and Houston is number 6, Dallas number 7 as far as Black communities, Black people in America, largest Black community. So we definitely want Houston and Dallas represented. I think those 2 cities out of the top 10 are the only 2 that are not represented. Well, we do have Brother Kofi in Houston trying to put some stuff together. So definitely want you to be a part of that. Sister Crystal, very powerful presentation. Sister, thank you for your new membership, your organizational membership within COBRA. We look to, and we have to have more national organizations as we do these local initiatives around the country, that we're vibing with our brothers and sisters who have chapters in these cities across organizations. So we'll be on the same message and on the same program happening across the country as we engage in these local initiatives. I don't want to take too much time on with my presentation. I'll bring Sister Lily X in. I thought I had 7 minutes, but if I'm sharing that, I'm just gonna shoot it over to Sister Lily X after I say one thing. We are in the most exciting time of the reparations movement since Reconstruction. During Reconstruction, there was several federal bills, constitutional amendments, all being pushed around this whole issue of what to do with Black folks after enslavement. There's not been that type of energy in this country around repairing Black people, about addressing the issues of Black people since that time up until now. In the early 2000s, the late 1990s, there was a lot of energy, the most energy since, Callie House and the Ex-Slave Mutual Pension and Bounties Association. Probably in 2000, late 1990s, early 2000s, we were at that particular point. But we've surpassed that now. We have 2 legislations in Congress. We have tons of allies, white, Japanese, spiritual institutions, et cetera. We have many organizations that have popped up. The media has every other day, there's a article around reparations. And then you have all that's going on in the local reparations arena. And we put out a pamphlet. Everybody knows that Evanston was the first city to pass a local reparations ordinance. Well, Chicago was the second city before Asheville, about a month before Asheville. And when I looked, and we were assisting Evanston after they passed the first component of it. There was 3 parts that Evanston had to pass. First, to establish the reparations task force. 2, to target the funding from marijuana. And the 3rd piece was utilizing those funds to go toward housing. So we came in when they were preparing the 2nd piece, is to target that money toward from the marijuana tax. And we were assisting them and helping them get that passed. And then we introduced them to some housing experts, national housing experts, and they were able to build their housing initiative. But having done what we did in Chicago and working with Evanston, I was able to look and see what was the guidelines, the foundation that we all should be working on around local reparations. And I wrote those things in a pamphlet called Laying the Foundation for Local Reparations. And we put that on Kindle, on Amazon, and people were buying it. And what we found, well, not what we found, what was indicated to us, that Amherst, which is like the 4th city, utilized the pamphlet. Kansas City utilized the pamphlet and has a reparations initiative. Detroit utilized our work around putting a referendum on the ballot and had that passed and now have a reparations task force. So what we know is what we put in this pamphlet actually works. It worked for us in Chicago, and it definitely has worked for other communities. And so I advise people to go and try to get that. We wanted to put it on our website so people can download it for free. But if you need a copy of that, just contact Brother James and make sure we get you a copy of that at no charge. But we know that what's put in that particular pamphlet works. And the three bases, I just want to end with this, the three bases of a reparations demand on the local level, which we also put in that pamphlet, what Chicago led with these three bases. We had a commission, were able to give testimony before the city council subcommittee that eventually passed the reparations subcommittee 17-0 in the committee, and then 47-2 in the full city council. What we led with was these three bases for making our demand. One was genocide. We were experiencing genocide in Chicago, and we're experiencing it in every city in America. When you look at the life expectancy among Black people anywhere in America is going to be lower. When you look at the maternal mortality rate of Black women anywhere in America is going to be lower. When you look at the infant mortality rate on Black children anywhere in America is going to be lower. When you look at the mental health of Black people anywhere in America is going to be lower. When you look at the violence and crime and the killing of Black people by Black people anywhere in America is going to be high. Those are evidence of genocide according to the Geneva Convention. So we were able to point out with data how that looked in Chicago. Every community in America can do that. The second basis for the demand, we brought in a white elder who did work around contract buying, and we looked at the plunder of the Black community from white Chicago. Everywhere in America, you can find instances of where white people have plundered our community. That's the second basis of demand. And then the third basis of demand was apartheid. Apartheid means separate development. Everywhere you see a disparity in education and health, it's the result of separate development. It's the result of targeted resources being targeted at our community in ways that is not being targeted at other communities, or resources withheld from our community in ways that is not being withheld from other communities. If you have disparities, you have apartheid. And we based our argument before the city council on genocide, plunder, and apartheid. And we got a 17-0 unanimous vote to initially start a Chicago reparations subcommittee. And then later, again, we went to the full city council. We got a 47-2 vote. Every community in America can point out genocide, can point out plunder, and can point out apartheid. That is the basis on which we make local reparations demands. And I'll end there.
Thank you, Brother Cam. Yes, local reparations initiatives, we all need to be focusing on that. All of our chapters need to be working on that. And I look for that material. Again, we were supposed to end about 5 minutes ago. So I think I'm gonna have to go back with Brother Uuka, who was our last panelist, and then we'll try if anybody wants to stay on it, and we'll listen to our youth commissioner, Sister Lily X, after Brother Uuka. Thank you, Brother Cam. Brother Uuka.
Yes, greetings.
Economic
Greetings,
development.
All right, greetings, brothers and sisters. I'd like to get my screen shared. All right, yes. Okay, so currently I'm serving as the co-chair of the Economic Development Commission. I'm the treasurer for the Baton Rouge chapter and also owner of Mojo Books and Products. Just to kind of give you a little introduction about myself. The topic that I'm going to discuss today is dealing with organizing and mobilizing for economic development. So we had a lot of discussions, and so some of the things that I'm going to cover in this presentation is, one, I'm going to define internal reparation, define economic system, talk about pooling of resources, collective models, and start an investment club or investment associations and other cooperatives. So I first want to start off by dealing with internal reparations because as Brother Cranston was dealing with the wealth injury area, we talked about why reparations is needed to close that gap. My part that I'm going to be focusing on is what we do now while we pursuing reparations. And first off, I have a definition. What we call internal reparations is defined as repairs that we as African people can do and benefit daily while we pursue external reparations from the United States government, corporations, institutions, and families responsible for the injuries that which we need to repair ourselves. And in that, I had the opportunity to years ago to read a paper written by Professor Chinwenzu, and as he spoke at the conference, Pan-African Conference in Nigeria in 1993, and he talked about how reparations is not just about money, and he talked about how we need to make all kinds of different repairs. He talked about how we have to how we need to make mental repairs, psychological repairs, cultural repairs, technological repairs, economic repairs, and political repairs. So these are things that we need to be doing right now as we pursue reparations, because we definitely need to work on building an infrastructure in place in anticipation of reparations. So these are some of the things I wanted to discuss dealing with internal reparations. And the next slide that I have is to provide definition of what I mean by economic system. And I borrowed this from the text of Dr. Amos Wilson, Blueprint for Black Power, and Falsification of African Consciousness by Dr. Amos Wilson. And it reads, an economic system like any other social system is the systematic way people choose to relate to each other. Thus, it is not the lack of money as the root cause of unstable economic system for Blacks, but it is the lack of us engaging in organized social relations of exchange with each other based on mutuality of interests, purposes, values, tastes, means of production, and the functional level of trust and fidelity. Furthermore, the conditions sufficient to the development of an economic system are generally and best achieved within a group which shares a common ethnic group or national identity, a shared history, set of experiences, customs, traditions, language, values, mythology, and culture. Thus, the characteristics of trust, reliability, and dependability are vital to the economic system. White capitalism is a system of social relations and social power which exploits and victimizes Blacks. So the essence, what I set up was to understand that when we're talking about economics, we're talking about how we first have to relate with each other. We have to be able to establish a level of trust. We have to establish a level of how we can be rely on each other, and understand that we need to depend on each other. So that sets the basis of what we'll be talking in terms of an economic system. And so on the next slide, we talked about the keys to empowerment. So the first one I have on here is dealing with group consciousness. We must elevate our level of group consciousness. And this is some of the things that were discussed earlier. Dealing with our history, we have to go back and look at what happened to us before we came on the shores of this country, and what happened to us during the Jim Crow era, what's happening to us now. We have to have this complete picture, and we have to have this understanding of our history and our culture so we can move forward, because this is, as Dr. Amos Wilson talks about in Blueprint for Black Power, he talks about once we elevate our level of group consciousness, this is going to allow us to coordinate the different activities so that we could achieve the goal. So the end result of it, like he indicated, is the end result is to be into self-determination, coup de chocolat, being able to do for ourselves. This is the end result of dealing with group consciousness. And there's ways, things that we have to do that. And one of the things that we have to do, I have listed here, is join existing organizations that are dealing with these particular issues, like in COBRA and several other organizations that are doing this type of work. I mentioned we want to form book clubs, 10 community events that's really educating our people about what's really happening, because a lot of this stuff like Dr. August Malvin mentioned, is that some of these things are not going to happen in the school system. So we're going to have to do our educating in the community. And the other point that I wanted to emphasize is that first point, neutralize social conditioning. And what we mean by that, white people basically have a system of rewards and punishment. There's ways of making our people behave in a certain way because they have the money, they have the resources to do certain things. So as we become more self-determined, we want to be able to neutralize that, so we won't have such, like Dr. Claude Anderson talks about, such inappropriate behavior that we see with our people. So this is some of the things that we need to do in terms of self-determination. And then the next point I have, the more patronizing of Black-owned businesses and so forth. I know this is something that definitely needs to happen. And as a Black business owner, I can tell you this past week, I have a clear example, a shining example of how our people could make things happen in that regards. I had a sister from New Jersey that went to the website, and the issue she had, she didn't want to use PayPal because that's the setup I use on the website. So she reached out to me to see if there was another way where she could purchase the book. So we worked it out. So in this thing, dealing with more patronizing Black-owned business, we talked about we need to make a concerted effort to support our Black-owned business. So the next point I have is called aggregation. This is in Powernomics. And what he talks about was that we already do this a lot of times when we, the way we vote. But one of the things that he talked about in Powernomics, which I'm showing you right here in Powernomics, we don't do it in terms of economics, as far as pooling resources to then do things that we could achieve our economic goals and so forth. We don't do enough pooling of resources. So he emphasized that this is what could actually stimulate economic development in our communities so we think about it, if the bottom line, if banks are not lending the money out properly, we could form groups where we could pool resources to actually start our own businesses in our own communities to deal with the needs of our people. The next part, dealing with vertical integration. This concept is a concept that we see, and just to give a simple concept of this, it's like if you have a Black grocery store purchasing produce from a Black farmer, and then they do business together. So this is a way of how we could actually engage in vertical integration, because vertical integration means that everybody goes up. Everybody goes up so we all are successful and stuff in terms of that. And we see this, and I see this quite often with this white mom and pop store here, that because they exclusively deal with one of the produce places and they won't do business with anybody else. So we have to be involved in what I call vertical integration. The next point, dealing with that's important, dealing with organizing, mobilizing for economic development, we have to have a code of conduct and group accountability. And Claude Anderson talks about this in Powernomics, and this is terms of how we deal with each other, how we behave, and things of that nature. In terms of if there's issues, if there's an issue with someone that may have an issue with a Black business owner, we need to be able to do some type of mediation, some kind of conflict resolution. We need to do this before, what happens quite often, and I see this, is that before we try this, there may be one of the customers that just go ahead and put on blast this business, but we just need to have this conversation of how we could reconcile that issue. So that's what we deal with when we talk about the code of conduct and group accountability. And then on the next slide that I have, dealing with redirecting the $1.6 trillion that we have in disposable income. Here you have listed these 10 large categories that I had, and this comes from Black Economics. I don't have the book right handy with me, but Black Economics, Juwanza Kunjufu, and what he deals with there is talking about, we have these large categories, but one of the clear things that we have to do, we have to make sure that we have the venue in terms of making sure that we have the businesses in place so our people can spend their money. So if we have to have the grocery stores, we have to have the department stores, we have to be able to build the houses and things of that nature. We have to engage in all these different areas to make sure that we are able to properly redirect the $1.6 trillion. Okay, and then this slide here, this slide comes from Economic Empowerment or Economic Enslavement by Jim Klingman. And this is some things that questions we should ask ourselves before we make a purchase. We need to ask ourselves, where is the money going? Who is this money going to help? Will my money be used to hire African Americans? Will it be used to assist some community program for our children? Is there a probability that my money will be used to purchase products or services from another Black person, business? Does the person or company getting my money respect me as a valued customer? And the last one, does the salesperson treat me fairly? So these are questions that needs to be raised, and these are things that we need to do as we dealing with making sure that we properly redirecting our money. And then, so this last part that I want to deal with is how to organize. And here, what we're talking about, we need to, when I'm talking about this in terms of if you want to form like some type of investment group, investment association, or some kind of group come together, you need to, one, assemble like-minded individuals who share the same goal, self-determination, race first philosophy. And that's very key. And then the other part that you want to make sure that you do is you want to assess the skills of the like-minded individuals. So you got to be bringing this group together, and you want to be able to do an inventory of the skills that the people that you have, whether or not they have accounting skills, carpentry skills, farming skills, marketing, you name it. And then if it comes to a point where the group may be lacking those skills, then we may need to outsource and make sure that we find someone of African descent to do this. And then the next thing we talked about is decide on the name of the investment club or a group and so forth. And then the other part dealing with, the group has to develop what we call a mission statement. And we have to have, what is the purpose of the existence and so forth. So we have to have that in writing so everybody knows what's really going on. The next one dealing with how you want to decide on monthly contributions each member could contribute. And the contributions, where we look at these contributions could be designed just to be seed money to begin the process of maybe doing something, in other words, you may have a short-term project that you may do to lead into a long-term project. And while this group is being formed, one of the key things that you want to make sure that you're doing, and Brother Cranston was talking about this, you want to be able to have the group to select certain books. You want the group to select books that analyze why we have poor socioeconomic conditions, and books that offer social economic solutions like Blueprint for Black Power and by Amos Wilson, and Powernomics by Claude Anderson. And then the next thing we want to do is make sure that we decide on the organizational structure, and then the last thing you want to do with your group, you want to make sure that you discuss risk appetites. And this basically deals with when you bring a group together, and you do certain investments, you want to make sure everybody's comfortable with what you're doing. And so and then the last part on the individual level, these are things that we could do on an ongoing basis. We develop our own budget. We have to understand this coming from Solutions for Black America by Jawansu Jufu. He talks about how you develop a budget, understand the distinction between needs and wants. And there's a slew of different things you could see right here. And because of time, I want to end by saying that this is a suggested reading list that the Economic Development Commission has put out. And these are things that we could read about. And we hope that the whole point is that this whole organized and mobilized for economic development could happen right now in pursuit of external reparations. And I want to make sure that's clear, because there are people that often say that all we have to do is raise ourselves by the bootstrap, and so we just focus on this aspect of it. But as Brother Cranston, when he was dealing with the wealth entry area, we're so far behind that. Reparations is needed, and that's one of the things that I appreciate about Dr. Claude Anderson, because in his Black Labor book, Black Labor, White Wealth, and Powernomics, he always keep reparations as part of the equation, and not and so that's very, very key. And I yield, and I'm done. I really appreciate everyone allowing me to discuss these issues.
And I want to thank you too, Brother Kawuka. That was very enlightening, and lots of books that we need to pick up and read. I'm supposed to end here with some words of encouragement and say that Brother Cam kind of hit it when he said we're in the most exciting time for reparations since the end of since Reconstruction, I believe he said. So we've been supported by different organizations, one in particular, Human Rights Watch, who wrote a letter to the Congress saying, while we can't wait for HR 40, we need it passed now. We're being looked at from all over the world. The United Nations is studying the injustice done to African people worldwide. They actually is going to be doing that for a whole decade, from 2014 to 2024. They call it the decade of people of African descent. There are studies and surveys and all kinds of things being looked at to see what reparations should be given to African Americans, not just African Americans, Africans worldwide. So that's what we need to do. We need to step it up, keep doing what we're doing. We have international support, and we got to make the best of it. We got to use all of our allies, and we need allies. One last thing, I wanted y'all to know that reparations is the most divisive political issue in America. The majority of whites are like 80% are against reparations for African Americans. All are not like the Republicans is about 90%. And we don't have all of the Democrats, people who registered as Democrats. It's like 50-50 of the Democrats. So we got some work to do to convince this government that they must do reparations, and that they will benefit from these reparations. So I think we went over our time by almost 30 minutes now. And so I want to end with that and allow people to leave if they have to. But however, we have a tendency to leave out our youth. And so one of our youth leaders ask for a minute or two to speak about organizing the youth for reparation. Sister Lily X, why don't you take about 5 minutes and we'll wrap it up.
Peace, brother. I appreciate the time. I won't be long. I just wanted to say thank you to all the speakers and the leadership from the Southwest Regional Division and the NCOBRA leaders that were here. I just want to say thank you for just the knowledge and the information. I did drop in the chat the NCOBRA Youth Commission email if you would like to connect with us, because kind of coattailing what Brother Uka was just talking about, we have a strategy where we are going to be doing reparations book clubs on college campuses. So I believe it was Dr. August who is with Prairie View, and so getting connected to BSUs and African student unions and things like that, doing a book club type structure. Shout out to Sister Crystal Muhammad from the National Black Panther Party. We definitely would like to connect with you and your youth. And I think, we're just trying to be on the front lines as much as possible, but I will be honest that you all are, I'm sure, are aware of a lot of the distractions, such as, TikTok and no, I say that jokingly, but because TikTok actually could be used as a platform to get our message out, to educate our youth around the 5 injury areas and the 5 areas of repair. So we're looking at things like that, also trying to beef up our, well, I'm going vegan. So to pump up our social media strategy. And, we look for as much help and partnership as we can get. So I'm not sure if that's my 5 minutes. Like I said, I put the Youth Commission email in there, and I saw Brother Uka, I saw your email and things like that. And so I definitely want to work with you in structuring the book clubs, because our commissions are paralleled in that. But I just thank you again, everyone, for being here. And Reparations Now, free the land.
Free the land. Okay. We're gonna just thank our host Kimberly Morris for the work that she's done to put this on. You were a lot of help, Sister Kimberly. We want to thank the Baton Rouge chapter, Sister Tyra, and Brother Jerry James for all of the behind the scene work that they've done advertising this teach-in. And we want to just thank again all of the panelists for their excellent reviews. I mean, everybody was really on time. And I just want to say thank you and have a great day. And Sister Kim, you can either close us out or.
Brother James?
Yes.
Oh, Mama Fatima? Mama
Fatima is, we want to give her all of the credit in the world. Mama Fatima put this together. I didn't. She just used, let me use my name in front of it, but it was the work of Mama Fatima in New Orleans that put this whole program together, designed it, and helped us to fund it. So we want to give her a big shout out, a great thank you, Sister Mama Fatima, for all the work that you've done to make this happen.
Black Power. Brother, this is Sister Crystal, the gentleman that's organizing the NCOBRA in Houston. Can somebody put us in contact with one another? I'd love to help him with getting the Houston chapter kicked off.
That's Brother Melville, August Melville, sure. We'll get you in touch. We'll share his information with you.
Thank you. I put my email in the chat for Lily and everybody. Y'all can get my number too. Anybody can get my number, and I'll forward the PowerPoint or help how we can. Black Power.
Attendees, just before everyone leaves, if our moderators would give us a couple extra minutes, I do have to report back to a funding source. If those in attendance, I'll do something different for the panelists, but those who just came, could you please leave us a note and tell us how you benefited or did not benefit, if that's how you feel, from this presentation, And what suggestions do you have for the next one? Because this is not the end. It just take you 90 seconds or whatever to type that into our chat. It's a permanent record because this is all recorded. And I want to thank you so much for taking time. I know this was a sacrifice. Everybody had other things they could have been doing. So thank you so much for coming. And I love y'all and hope to see you on another one next time we give one.
Ashe. So while people are putting their comments in, I'm gonna lean back on my sister Iyamode to give us some final words of spiritual uplifting.
And I'll just repeat this because I usually close with this. For the motherland, the cradle of civilization. For our ancestors and their indomitable spirits. For our elders from whom we can learn much. For our youth who hold the promise for tomorrow. For our people, the powerful people. For the principle of unity which should guide us in all that we do. And all this for our Creator who provides all things great and small. Ashe.
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 Thank you, everyone.
All right.
And we can check out now. Thank you.
Peace and blessings. And
Peace and
everybody was so powerful. Whew. Enjoy.